Good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's discussion sponsored by Capture Higher Ed. Relationships matter, using data to increase graduate enrollment. At this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself, and then I'm going to give it over to our other presenter, Jack. The voice you're listening to right now, I am Amanda Scott. I am the person on the left, not the guy on the page. And I am the senior, if you're wondering, I'm the one on the left. I am the Senior Director of Market Management at Capture Higher Ed. My background in education is in higher education administration. My last CETA position was Financial Aid Director at Mars Hill University down in North Carolina. At Capture, right now my position is creating value with all of our customer segments. And that could be across undergrad, graduate, online, and advancement offices, as those are all partnerships that we serve. So at this point in time, I'd love to throw it over to Jack and let him introduce himself.
Hello, Amanda. It's great to be with you again.
Thank you, Jack.
You're welcome. Hello, everyone. My name is Jack Klett. Amanda creates value across all of our customer segments. And I do it in the area of graduate and online initiatives. So I'm Director of Graduate and Online Initiatives for Capture Higher Ed. I have been Chief Enrollment Officer for 3 institutions across populations, but specializing in graduate and professional education. I served as Associate Dean of Graduate Studies for 2 institutions, an academic appointment for 4.5 years. In graduate education, launching new programs, creating value for existing graduate students, faculty oversight, and certainly partnering with enrollment to optimize those programs in terms of the students in classes. So I am super happy to be with you today.
Well, thank you, Jack. Why don't you get us started by setting the table and telling us why we're here today, what you would like to share with everyone?
I am happy to do it. So I've always been fascinated by this idea of human connection. And I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole here and talk too much of things outside of higher ed, but I think for setting the stage, Amanda, I will. So as you know, my graduate degree is in political science, and I am probably the geekiest politics person you know. I teach politics and world affairs at Thomas Jefferson University and obsess about every political development of every single day. So I am obsessing quite a bit these days. So suffice to say, this presentation is not going to be about politics, but it is about human connection. And in this regard, we can learn a lot from politics. So as emotional beings, our emotional responses to messages and the people delivering them actually often override the areas of our brain that serve as our logic and reason centers. So I'm not going to bore everyone with the science behind this. You can read all about it. Simon Sinek came out with a great book a few years ago called Start With Why, where he talks about this. When we apply this to politics, this is why those candidates who elicit an emotional response from voters often perform much better than those who, simply outline great 10-point plans. In the best of times, we respond to inspiration. And in the worst of times, we respond to fear. In no time do we respond to a 10-point plan. So what we want to do today is share how this concept of human interaction can be applied to our work as graduate enrollment professionals, and how data, specifically human behavioral data, can allow us to make far more meaningful connections with prospective graduate students and therefore help us meet our enrollment goals.
So Jack, when you're describing what we're going to talk about today, you keep bringing up this idea of relationships. So why is that such an important topic to you?
Well, I think that human relationships is at the very heart of higher education. And so often the relationship between prospective students and the institution starts in admissions. So there is so much that we do know, and there's a lot of research that has backed this knowledge up. So there's a lot in the enrollment management literature about the benefits of influencing the influencer. So to folks who are on the line here who are viewing today that also have some carryover with undergrad, this might look somewhat familiar to you, right? We know that building relationships with influencers has a positive effect on enrollment, which is why we spend time communicating with guidance counselors and career counselors and college counselors, why we spend time communicating with parents and families of prospective students, why we spend time communicating with the coaches and advisors of extracurricular organizations like DECA or Model UN or other extracurricular organizations that align with your institution's program set. It's why we spend time interacting and communicating with teachers, particularly and increasingly STEM educators and art and design and music educators for our colleges of art and design. So we spend a lot of time doing that. As a quick side note, for those of us here who do specialize in grad, when our undergrad friends are communicating with these influencers, that's an opportunity to engage and talk and educate about the graduate offerings at the institution. Not really detracting from the undergraduate effort there, but just making folks aware that of the graduate programs that exist, because some of these influencers may be very interested in those graduate offerings. We also know that there are positive impacts on enrollment when families and prospective students wish to build relationships with us, right? They're reaching out to the admissions staff, in some cases directly kind of past us to faculty, in an effort to establish a relationship and make a good impression so that their son or daughter is seen in a certain light, and with effort, the hope is that that can positively impact their application for enrollment. So those are some of the things that we do know, but there's also a lot that we don't know. And what about when we think about the things that we don't know? If you're kind of exploring the literature, what about those prospective students who don't reach out to us to connect? What is the impact on graduate admissions counselor-driven relationships? What influence does graduate admissions counselor-driven communication have on enrollment? So a lot we know, and a good amount that we don't know, where we need to dig a little deeper.
So Jack, I've been friends with you for a few years, and I know that you don't only teach politics. I know that you also teach business courses. And I've seen you present to higher ed audiences where higher ed can learn from businesses. So do you have any applications where you think that businesses can apply their knowledge over in this space?
Well, you know me well, Amanda, and I'm always looking at ways to kind of bring in some business stuff into higher ed. So you are spot on. And I think we know a lot more than we think we do. If we take a look at business, and in this case, let's look specifically in the world of sales. I love this quote from Sheila Kloefkorn. Sheila is president of an Arizona-based marketing firm, and she says, a sale is a transaction made possible via the alignment of price and product with relationship and message. And this is the important part here. These days, without a relationship, prospects are unwilling to risk buying an expensive product.
That's right. And I was a former financial aid director myself, as I mentioned earlier, and we started up a couple of grad programs at the institution right prior to when I left. And I really learned that same lesson with grad education, that it can be a very expensive product. So making that connection is very important.
Yes, it can be an expensive product. And, in some cases, there are some grad programs that are cheaper than undergrad tuition. And in other cases, there are some, especially those in the executive delivery format that are quite expensive. For me, this quote really makes sense if we let ourselves take a moment and think in terms of business. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and ask this question: are admissions counselors salespeople? And I know immediately I can picture the audience, because I've presented on some of these topics enough to know the reaction. Half of the folks listening are probably shaking their head saying, yeah, there's a lot of overlap in sales skills and what our admissions counselors are asked to do. And then there's a whole bunch of other people that are sitting there probably with their arms crossed in front of them saying, no, there is no parallel. So I'm going to kind of unpack this a little bit this way. Let's take a look at the surface level, right? So if we think back to Sheila's quote, she talked about the combination of product and price aligned with relationship and message. So the fact of the matter is, Amanda, we have a product, and it's education, right? It's the education that we provide, that our faculty provide to our students. We certainly have a price. It is the tuition that is charged. We have a message, and at the graduate level, that message tends to be the differentiating value propositions of our respective graduate program offerings, but always connected and aligned with our mission as an institution, right? Graduate programs don't exist in a vacuum. They are aligned with the institutional mission, and that message resonates, and it is important. We build relationships. That's what counselors and particularly at the graduate level, graduate faculty are doing with prospective graduate students. So on the surface, we have all of the elements that are required for a sales transaction. I tend to see us more as educational evangelists. So I always said, I'm a graduate education evangelist. I think if you go on my Twitter, it says higher education evangelist. And I do believe that is at the very heart of our role in higher education, really regardless of our position, but certainly for those who are championing our program offerings. We seek fit. So this isn't a simple matter. People say, well, this, or I guess as I'm saying, well, this could be like higher education can be like a business, but this isn't as simple as someone coming to us and saying, hey, I have this money, I want to give it to you, and you're going to let me into your program. We don't work that way. We seek fit. So we want to make sure that the education that we're providing is one that is providing real value in the way we want it to provide value. And that there are serious benefits that come along with participating in a graduate program, and that mastery is acquired. And to that end, that means that the shape of the class matters. The way in which those students interact with one another will matter. So we tend to take a far greater holistic view of an applicant to determine whether or not that student is going to be the right fit for our specific program. And will that student at their core align with our mission? So we believe in our product, and we are champions of our product because our product is the education we provide. That said, on the surface level, you can come back to this idea that admissions counselors can serve as sales folks.
So Jack, in my prior life, I was also an admissions counselor, and I knew it was very controversial to say statements like that. So you need to tell me why you think it's so important to convince us that we're all in sales, because that can sometimes be a hard sell.
Yeah, it does seem like I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to convince folks, yeah, we're all in sales. It's all my sales friends, of which I have many. I hope they aren't taking this as if I personally have something against sales or that we do in higher ed. I don't. In fact, and you know this well, Amanda, if it weren't for the great work of our capture sales friends, you and I would not have salaries. So they do play an important role. And look, colleges are often against viewing themselves through the lens of business. Profit is not their objective. So anything that touches on business functions typically isn't received very well. And having spent 20 years working on college campuses myself, I completely get it. There are so many wonderful things that exist on a college campus that come with membership in a learning community that far surpass what one experiences at even the greatest company with the absolute best culture. The fact is, a graduate admissions counselor could make a heck of a lot more money working in sales for a company. But if you attend any NAGAP annual conference, of course, NAGAP is the Association for Graduate Enrollment Management. Their annual conference happens to be coming up in just a few weeks here in April in Toronto. I will be there. Stop by and say hi. But if you attend any of those conferences and you talk with folks, they will tell you, and it will become very clear that they are not in it for the money. They're in it for the connection, for the human connection that I was talking about earlier, and finding that right fit prospective student, talking with them about their goals, sharing the value of the education their institution or graduate program provides, helping make that prospective graduate student's goals attainable. And Amanda, on the best day, that student's dreams come true. That is the magic of their role. So to be clear, what I am saying is that we know relationship building is the most important factor in sales. We know our graduate admissions counselors look forward to establishing and cultivating relationships with prospective students. So if we put these two concepts together with the right tools, our graduate admissions teams can achieve even the most ambitious of their enrollment goals.
So how do you propose putting those two things together? And how does data help with that?
Well, I want to be clear. We aren't really creating the wheel here. It isn't like we've discovered fire. In fact, graduate recruiters are already using data to cultivate relationships. In fact, all of us do. When we have a conversation with someone, we are using explicit data, right? So this is information that the person is sharing with us, and we're using that explicit data to shape and inform our response to that person. We're using other bits of data too that aren't as explicit. It's part of the great thing about being a human being. We're using these and processing these physical and nonverbal cues. So the way a person holds themselves, the tone of their voice when communicating, these are all discrete bits of data that we're using to shape our message and the way we are communicating verbally and non-verbally. So from its purest sense, there's nothing really groundbreaking in what I'm proposing here. But it becomes groundbreaking when we're able to account for virtual behavioral data to shape when and how we communicate and with what message.
So you're speaking about capture behavioral engagement, CBE.
Yeah, I am, and this is where we have discovered fire. And I've been talking quite a bit here, Amanda. So I'm going to take a quick drink of water. Do you mind explaining what CBE is?
Sure. So CBE is most simply broken down as a string of code that you put across your website. And that allows one to be able to see the activity of the prospective student when they go on to all of your pages. So any page from a graduate studies page all the way over to a financial aid page, a student life page, athletic, academics pages. Did you get that water?
I did. Sorry, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, thanks for the quick explanation. We're going to dive into this, I think, a little bit more. What you have here is a quick example of a contact profile. So Anne here is going to be our guinea pig. She's going to serve as our prospective graduate student for today's discussion. So let's unpack this a little bit and give folks some really good takeaways here of what they can do. Every single morning, those who are using Capture Behavioral Engagement, the admissions counselors will find a daily visit report in their inbox, and so that's what you're seeing here right on the screen. So this report shows every single identified visitor who has been on the .edu over the past 24 hours. It includes what information they read, how long they were on the site, a hot link that goes right to the visitor contact profile in the CBE Engage dashboard. So Amanda, for today, we're going to use you as our graduate admissions counselor. You would come to work, you would open your email and review your daily visitor report. And you would see that at least one of these visitors is interested in the graduate program you recruit and enroll for. So you go ahead and you click the link. And here is the prospective student's contact profile. So clicking the link takes you right into the Engage dashboard. And you're able to review Anne's location. We see there is Anne being in Tampa. You can also see her email address. You can see her current admission status. You also have quick access to her social media accounts, so any public posts that she has placed, you can view those too. You can see how many visits she's made to your website, how many pages she's viewed. Down in the lower right there, you'll see the tag cloud, which shows from a larger topical perspective what has been the most important content to Anne over time. But most importantly, you can see the actual pages she's viewed. That's where you see that in the visit details. You see that date, October 23rd. If you were to click on that, you'd see a rich history of 15 pages that she's viewed. So the reason why this is most important is because it's telling you exactly what content and what information is most important to Anne.
So the one feature that I really find of value is the scores and predictions section next to the map up in the middle. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, that's a key section, because that's actually going to be what actually triggers and drives all of this great outreach and great work. So Capture's data science team developed an algorithm that provides a numeric metric to measure how presently engaged a prospective student is with the institution. So the engagement score is measuring Anne's engagement over the last 7 days. So that's where you're seeing that 15, engagement score of 15. So that is measuring Anne's engagement over the last 7 days, and that's updated daily. So it's a rolling engagement score. The score below that, where you see the 62, that score is what we call the affinity index. And the affinity index measures Anne's relationship with the institution over the entire contact lifetime. So from the very first visit Anne made to the present day, the closer it gets to 100, the more likely Anne is to enroll.
So Jack, you used CBE when you were leading the recruitment efforts at Thomas Jefferson University. Can you share a little bit about how you used this profile?
I will, and I'm going to get pretty specific, because I want folks to have some takeaways here. So let me use this slide to kind of to do it. I'll break things down. So basically, what we're trying to do here is to learn when to engage, how to engage, and with what message to engage with. And Capture Behavioral Engagement helps us do all this. So putting CBE aside just for a moment, no engagement should go unanswered. So even if you don't have Capture Behavioral Engagement, anytime someone is interacting with your office, with your institution. Anytime that person is engaged, they should be engaged in return. No engagement should go unanswered. And each engagement is an opportunity. It's an opportunity, yes, to respond to whatever it is that particular prospective student is asking or engaging with us for, but it's also an opportunity to build a better relationship, to build that connection. In this particular case, when we think about capture behavioral engagement, our knowledge of when to engage is simple. Every day we're getting that daily visit report, every morning. So every morning, each specific counselor has their hot list of who to engage for that day. And they know that they're going to, when that person shows up on the daily visit report, that they're going to be responding within 24 to 48 hours. So that is where we see the when to engage. As it relates to how to engage, this is where we really let the capture behavioral engagement scores, both the affinity index and the engagement score, be our guide. So there are basically four methods of engagement. There's direct counselor outreach, right? So this is that human interaction. This is when the counselor is either sending the email themselves, is writing a postcard, is picking up the phone, either texting or making the phone call, but it's that human outreach that is occurring. Then we have dynamic content. So dynamic content, we'll see an example of that in a moment, is basically information that is displaying on the .edu that is informed, 100% informed by the experience of that unique prospective student as a visitor to the site. So the code that you talked about, Amanda, that code is saying, oh, this is Anne, and I know what Anne's status is, I know what Anne's scores are, I know what information Anne is interested in, therefore I am going to display this content for Anne. And that's all automated. Then there's digital display targeting. So when someone is visiting the .edu and they're looking at specific types of information, as they leave our .edu, digital advertising is going to follow them around the world of the internet that is speaking to them about information that is relevant to them, that they're interested in, because their virtual behavior has demonstrated that that particular message is of interest. And then the other way that we would engage, is how to engage, would be through print. And I'm not talking about print of messages that we're just pushing out, right? Like let's get 8,000 of these postcards developed. I'm talking about dynamic print, print that is developed and based on an individual visitor's behavior on the website, triggers. So that if someone is interested in a specific program or a specific program, perhaps it is a postcard that is highlighting faculty achievements in that program that automatically prints and is mailed. So that is kind of the how to engage through those four methods: human interaction, and then also dynamic automated interaction. And then lastly, we come to, well, with what message? How do I know what message to send to a prospective student? We've gotten really good at this as graduate enrollment practitioners over the years. We have our wonderful CRMs that help us with drip campaigns, what if scenarios, if this, then this. The problem with that is that is all something that we prescribe. So we create these comm flows, we create these pieces, we create these messages because we believe they will resonate. And they're programmed to go out, usually within timed intervals, and they're delivered. And in some cases, they show up at a prospective student's house or in their inbox, and they are super receptive to this message. They're like, wow, this is great. Thank you so much. And maybe that creates an opportunity for an interaction and they're going to respond. Or in other scenarios, this message is delivered because the CRM said it was time to deliver this message, and it doesn't get that response. Someone gets it and says, I'm not really interested in this right now, and kind of puts it aside. The beauty of the data we now have is we have tools, namely in this case, capture behavioral engagement, but we have tools that allow us to know exactly what message to deliver to each unique student, because that student has already told us in a virtual way what it is that they're seeking, the content that is driving them. So let me give you some quick kind of examples. At Jefferson, if we had someone who was in lead or suspect status, right? So this was someone who had not formally raised their hand to say, hey, I am officially inquiring, I am a prospective student. If that person had received a 35 Capture Affinity Index score or higher, we would go ahead and push that person to prospect because they're behaving like a prospect. Capture strategic advisors told me and my team that anyone with a 35 or higher is behaving like a prospect. So push that person to prospect status, place them into that CommFlow funnel of communication that a prospective student would give. And then we're also going to launch some dynamic content to them around this notion of visiting, be it a virtual open house, info session. We used to do graduate open studios as a type of visit experience for our graduate students. Every call to action should be coupled. Every new call to action, in this case, it was around the visit. By the way, if you had a score of a 45 or higher and you were in prospect or inquiry status and had yet to apply, well, now your messaging is going to be informed and shaped around a new call to action, which would be the call to action to apply. So dynamic content, any digital display targeting, or even counselor outreach would be shaped around this next call to action. As it relates to counselor outreach, every new call to action should be accompanied with counselor outreach of some sort. And the message that counselor is delivering is not, hey, you should apply, right? That is the overall call to action, but that's not the message. The message instead would be tailored by the data. So if a graduate counselor was going to be contacting someone who just hit this score of 45, that conversation might go something like this. Let's assume that based on the data that we see, that prospective student was most recently on the graduate assistantships page. So again, using you this time, Amanda, as the prospective student, our conversation would go something like this. Hi, Amanda, I'm calling to discuss the availability of graduate assistantships. If I didn't reach you, I would say, call me back so we can discuss assistantships and other ways to make this education investment possible. If I then don't hear back from you in 24 hours, I would send an email with grad assistantships in the subject and link to the relevant .edu pages and the grad application. So basically what you're using the scores to inform what the call to action should be, but you're wrapping that call to action into a message of content that is going to be specifically relevant to that prospective student based on what they've experienced. I'm going to move forward here and talk a little bit about what capture behavioral engagement provides. And the long and short of it is it provides a rich set of data-informed actions to forge a meaningful relationships between the prospective student, the institution, and particularly important in grad, the program and its faculty. You have, as part of capture behavioral engagement, this wonderful graduate admissions counselor, and in some cases, program recruiter or even faculty. Capture provides through the strategic advisor engagement training. So you know how to use those scores and how you should be tailoring your messages. You're getting that daily visitors report in your inbox every morning. You're getting the unique prospect scoring, that affinity index, that engagement score that is then going to inform overall outreach. Capture is prescribing what that counselor outreach strategy should look like. And of course, part of all of this is dynamic content. So triggered content on the .edu, triggered digital display content as someone leaves the .edu and is going about the internet, and triggered direct mail that I had talked about earlier when we were talking about print. I want to give folks just an idea of kind of how dynamic content works. So what you're seeing here is a .edu. So this is the website for an institution. And this happens to be what we refer to as a progressive identification form. It is a piece of dynamic content that triggers based on rule sets that have been determined in collaboration of Capture's strategic advisor and also the enrollment team on the ground for this institution. And once these rule sets, once these triggers are reached, this short form fill launches. And this is a way in which Capture helps institutions generate new inquiries. This is just one type of dynamic content. Here you see a quick campaign that was put together for our friends at the University of Toledo. You can see here that this was a dynamic content piece known as a toaster. So it's a quick pop-up in the bottom right corner here. This was a campaign for international students. So anyone, any time where CBE, Capture Behavioral Engagement, recognized that an IP address or personal display device ID was being triggered or accessed outside the United States, anytime that happened, this dynamic content piece would launch. And then it would shift over and convert so that you were getting a testimonial from an international student who talked about the welcoming experience at University of Toledo. So that is quite a bit of information I feel like we've provided. But I wanted to give folks an idea of how you can actually use this tool to produce data, discrete bits of data that allow you to not only generate more inquiries, but increase conversion because you're able to advance that relationship in ways you never would have been able to before. What I just want to let folks know is this is now the fun stuff that I get to do. So after spending 20 years on the institution side, I get to hang out and talk with current graduate enrollment professionals across the country. I love talking with folks about their unique challenges, the things that they're dealing with on the ground. And as everyone knows who's on the line here, every graduate shop is different. Every graduate shop is unique because graduate enrollment is decentralized. In many cases, it's a bit fractured. So for me, these conversations are always new and fresh. And then together, we come back in a later conversation with a prescribed solution, a set of options that exist for us to really create meaningful gains and resolve those pains that you're experiencing so that we can help you deal with those challenges and meet your enrollment goals. So I'm happy to have those conversations. And I know that in the follow-up email that folks will receive, they will see how they can go ahead and schedule one of these assessment conversations. Last thing, Amanda, before I turn things back over to you and we get to questions, I want to leave folks with this. Albert Einstein, if you always do what you always did, you will always get what you always got. And I love this quote because it really applies a lot to me. So I was often guilty of doing the same things over and over, and then each cycle I would add new strategies, right? So I'd go to a conference like NAGAP or American Marketing Association Higher Ed Symposium, and I'd learn some new really fun strategy that we'd like to deploy. And we would add this in and cycle after cycle, the things that we were doing would just add up. And you have a limited staff. Your staff can only do so many things. So I recognized that it was time to stop doing this and really determine how to do things in a smarter way to maximize the return on our work. And that's when things really pivoted for me professionally and the institutions I worked for benefited. We have limited time. We have limited resources. We have limited people in terms of the size of our staffs. So anything that we can do to make this work easier, to be able to turn to our teams and say, these are the people that you should be reaching out to because these are the people who are most engaged with us. And we know that we can make that connection. And empowering your team to do that work, to make that connection. That's when we know things will really improve. I'm going on a little bit here, so Amanda, I'm going to stop and shut my mouth and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Jack, for all this knowledge that you share with us today. At this time, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them into the questions panel to the right side of your screen. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. We will be disseminating this recording via email, so you'll get a copy of it. And do come to our next webinar, which is on March 27th, a Wednesday, and that's on digital advertising. I'm going to hand it back over to Jack, give him thanks for presenting today, and thank everyone who was here in attendance. Jack?
Yeah, thank you so much, Amanda. And thank you, everybody, for attending. This was a Capture Higher Ed web presentation all about establishing meaningful relationships and the ways in which we can use the data and the new tools that we have to make those relationships matter in terms of our enrollment work. So thank you, everybody. And until next time, we will see you. Have a great day.